In a vast city square, a large crowd gathers before a raised platform where a lone figure stands beside a guillotine. A flashback shows a body being dragged mercilessly through the dirt by a horse, a sword scraping the ground nearby. On the execution platform, a battered woman with a hood over her head trembles before a stern man, a hangman's noose dangling ominously above them. A hand violently yanks her head back by the hair, forcing her to look up from her kneeling position. Her face is revealed, bruised and bloodied, but her eyes burn with pure, undiluted hatred. An official on the stage addresses the silent onlookers, formally identifying the condemned as Catherine of Wojtyla. He loudly proclaims that this woman, the Crown Princess, conspired with her home nation to plot the assassination of Crown Prince Halis, branding her a terrible criminal. The crowd immediately erupts into a furious mob, shouting for her death and demanding she be executed without delay. Catherine's mind races in confusion, unable to comprehend why she is being sentenced to death. The faces of the Highland Kingdom's rulers, King Henry and Queen Eliza, flash through the scene. Other key figures are shown: the maid Maria, the Crown Prince's younger brother Liam, and his fiancée Christina. Finally, the face of Halis, the Crown Prince of the Highland Kingdom, appears cold and unforgiving. On a balcony, nobles watch the spectacle. A man calls her a treacheress, while a woman looks on with an expression of pure disgust. A maid, watching from a high vantage point, hurls an object down toward the execution stage. The projectile, a rock, strikes Catherine squarely in the head, making her cry out in pain. A blonde noblewoman looks on, remarking on how foolish Catherine appears. Another nobleman warns those around him not to make eye contact with the condemned woman, claiming she will curse them. Catherine ignores the pain and glares fiercely at the royals and nobles who watch her ordeal from their privileged position. She realizes with horror that these people, once her family, are not only about to kill her but are smiling as if they are enjoying it. A desperate, choked sound escapes her lips as she tries to scream. Her thoughts clarify that her throat has been crushed, leaving her unable to even speak, let alone curse her accusers or explain her innocence. Despite her inability to speak, her eyes convey a powerful, defiant will. The official continues his damning speech, declaring her actions to be an act of treason by the nation of Wojtyla, an attack on the Highland royal family that demands the most severe punishment possible. He raises his voice to a roar, announcing that by the laws of the kingdom, they will not only execute the heinous criminal but also declare war on the nation of Wojtyla. Catherine screams in despair, her mind reeling as she questions how everything could have led to this disastrous outcome. Tears stream down her face as she is overwhelmed by the injustice and sorrow of her fate. Her memory drifts back 3 years, to when she first arrived in the Highland Kingdom from her homeland of Wojtyla, sent as the Crown Prince's fiancée to be a symbol of peace. Now, instead of being a bridge between nations, she is being executed as the worst traitor in the kingdom's history, falsely accused of betraying both the crown and the prince. Her gaze finds Crown Prince Halis among the spectators, and she silently pleads with him, wondering if he will intervene. She questions why he won't speak up and tell everyone that the accusations are a lie. For a moment, their eyes meet across the crowded square, a silent and final exchange. Halis' expression remains cold and unmoving, offering no hint of salvation. He thinks to himself that her pleading look is disgraceful and that it would have been better if she had simply died quickly and without a fuss. Raising his arm, Halis shouts the command for the execution to be carried out immediately. Catherine can only scream his name in utter shock and betrayal as the execution begins. She is pushed forward, her body falling towards the waiting noose as the executioner stands impassively. The final order is given to execute the sentence, and the mechanism of the guillotine is released. In her last moments, Catherine vows that even if her life ends, she will never forgive this country or Halis, not even in the next world. Her eyes, transformed by rage, blaze with a final, unbreakable promise of vengeance: never. Her lifeless body hangs limp in the noose. The once packed square is now completely empty, leaving only the grim execution platform standing alone. A lone figure looks upon the scene of the execution, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. Catherine's spirit, or a memory of her, clutches a cross necklace at her throat. The tearful man kneels before a vision of her, swearing that next time he will protect her, even if it costs him his life. Her consciousness floats, remembering her arrival 3 years prior, filled with dreams of forging a bond between Wojtyla and the Highland Kingdom. She is gripped by a final, agonizing thought, worrying what will become of her homeland and her parents now that Highland has invaded. She finds that even after death, her mind and memories persist, allowing her to continue thinking. Suddenly, she feels herself lying on a soft surface and opens her eyes to see her own hand before her. She sits up with a jolt, completely bewildered by her new surroundings. Instead of a public square, she finds herself in an elegant, ornate bedroom. Her hand goes to her neck, where she feels the familiar cross necklace, heightening her confusion. She gasps, realizing with a start that she can speak again. The thought crosses her mind that perhaps she has become a ghost, unable to move on because of her lingering hatred. A polite knock sounds at her door, and a maid enters, cheerfully wishing her a good morning. The maid pulls back the heavy curtains, letting in the morning light and gently chiding her for still being sleepy. She then reminds her that tomorrow is the big day, the day she will be married and depart for the Highland Kingdom. Catherine stares, stunned, recognizing her personal maid, Shirley, and weakly asks why she is here. Shirley expresses concern, noting that Catherine is saying strange things and asking if she was having a bad dream. Shirley tells her she cannot remain in bed, as they have a full schedule of preparations for the day. The maid gently guides her to a vanity, saying she will start by fixing her hair. Catherine sits before the triptych mirror, staring at her own reflection. She sees a much younger version of herself, unmarked by the wounds and despair of her execution. Shirley begins to comb through her long, healthy hair. As her maid works, Catherine continues to gaze at her reflection, a look of dawning comprehension on her face. Her mind struggles to process the impossible situation, wondering what is happening. The horrifying memory of her death contrasts with her current reality, and she understands that her time has rewound 3 years to when she was just an 18-year-old girl. She silently questions why she has been sent back to this specific day, the day before her departure for Highland. Later, she is shown sitting in a grand dining room, dressed but still lost in thought. Shirley stands beside her, a look of quiet concern on her face as Catherine remains silent and withdrawn. Catherine suddenly stands from the dining table, her chair scraping against the floor. Her parents, King Felrond and Queen Castai of Woltilla, greet her for breakfast. The king grimly remarks that this will be their last meal together, but the queen chides him for such somber words. The three of them sit in silence at the long, formal table, a palpable distance between them. Tears well in Catherine's eyes as she looks at her mother and father, the weight of her future knowledge crashing down on her. She breaks down sobbing, apologizing for her tears as her mother expresses concern. Her parents leave their seats and rush to her side to comfort their distraught daughter. Catherine looks up at them through her tears, her face a mask of sorrow. Her mother pulls her into a tight, warm embrace. The queen whispers an apology to Catherine, lamenting that one so young must be burdened with the fate of their nation and the weight of world peace. Her father, King Felrond, watches the emotional scene with a heavy heart. The queen explains that the persistent tension between their country and the Highland Kingdom threatens to ignite a war that would engulf the entire continent, and that Catherine is the only one who can prevent it. The terrible truth solidifies in Catherine's mind. This is indeed the morning of the day before she was to depart for the Highland Kingdom and her doomed marriage. Her heart hammers in her chest as she clutches her dress, fully grasping the second chance she has been given. A spark of hope ignites within her. She has been sent back to change her own tragic fate. She looks at her concerned parents, her mind racing to find a way out. In a sudden outburst, Catherine cries out to her mother and father that she does not want to go, leaving them stunned. She desperately tries to explain that marrying Haelys is pointless because the Highland Kingdom has always intended to wage war against them. She reveals their true ambition is to expand their military and territory in a ruthless quest to become the world's most powerful kingdom. Pleading, she insists that she can't be a bridge of peace and that going to Highland will only lead to her death. She realizes that if time has truly rewound to save her, then she must cancel the wedding and remain in Woltilla at all costs. The king and queen stare at their daughter, their faces etched with shock and disbelief at her frantic words. Catherine begs them to believe her and call off the wedding immediately. Her father dismisses her plea, stating that it is far too late to back out now, as doing so would provoke a serious diplomatic incident. She screams in desperation, begging her parents to listen and crying out that she doesn't want to die. The king rises from his seat, his expression hardening. He walks towards his pleading daughter with a heavy, determined stride. He places a firm hand on her shoulder, silencing her cries. With cold finality, he declares that her marriage to the crown prince is her unchangeable fate, a destiny tied to improving relations with the Highland Kingdom. He tells her this has been her purpose from the very moment she was born into the world. He orders her to forget her outburst and compose herself before the escort from Highland arrives that night. Without another word, her father turns and walks out of the room, leaving her alone with her mother. Catherine makes one last, desperate plea, begging him to listen to what she has to say. He shouts back, "Enough!" and commands her to go cool her head. The heavy doors close behind him, sealing her fate and leaving her in the silent, ornate dining room. Her strength gives out, and she collapses onto the floor in a heap of despair. She questions the point of it all, wondering why her life was rewound if her fate was still sealed and unchangeable. Just as her father declared, the engagement was not cancelled, and her path remained unaltered. Later, a grand carriage makes its way through a dense forest, carrying her away from her home. Catherine sits inside, gazing out the window with a look of quiet resignation. She wonders if it's still possible to change her destiny now that she must do so from within the hostile Highland kingdom. The carriage comes to a halt, and Catherine steps out, greeted by her maid Shirley. A stern-faced woman from the Highland escort informs her that all her possessions from Waltilla are to be disposed of. She must change into clothes provided by Highland. The woman then introduces a trio of new attendants who are to serve Lady Catherine from now on. Catherine looks upon the new maids who will replace her trusted servants. One of the maids, a young woman with dark hair, steps forward with a polite smile, saying they look forward to serving her. A jolt of recognition and horror strikes Catherine as she identifies the maid as Maria, the very same woman who looked at her with such disgust during her execution. She remembers how in her previous life, Maria had approached her with false kindness when she was naive and knew nothing of the court's treachery. Her mind fills with rage as she recalls how this cunning maid trapped her with underhanded schemes, systematically destroying her reputation. Her eyes fall upon an ornate, sharp hairpin resting in a nearby jewelry box. A dark and vengeful thought consumes her. She should kill Maria right here and now, before she can ruin her again. The sharp point of the hairpin gleams menacingly. Her hand twitches, ready to reach for the potential weapon. She moves to grab it, her mind set on vengeance. Before she can act, another hand, Maria's, plucks the hairpin from its velvet cushion. Maria holds it up, innocently asking Catherine if she likes this particular one. The maid offers to put the pin in Catherine's hair, commenting on how well it would suit her. Catherine forces herself back to reality, realizing that impulsively killing Maria would be a disastrously foolish move. She schools her features into a mask of cold composure, thanks Maria, and tells the maid that she is counting on her. Clenching her fist at her side, she hardens her resolve. The key is to not repeat the mistakes of her past. The vivid, painful memories of her harsh days in Highland burn in her mind, a constant reminder of the people who betrayed her. Her face twists in a silent snarl, the hatred from her past life momentarily surfacing. Now changed into Highland attire, she stands stiffly as Maria attends to her. She touches the cross at her neck, a flicker of doubt crossing her features as she wonders if she can truly navigate this treacherous path. Her carriage continues on, the grand spires of the Highland Kingdom's castle looming in the distance. The carriage passes through the main gates and into the imposing castle courtyard. With newfound purpose, Catherine steps onto the cobblestone ground of her enemy's home. She stands tall and defiant, her long hair flowing behind her as she presents herself to the court. A smiling nobleman officially welcomes Lady Catherine to the Highland Kingdom. He then introduces her fiancé, Crown Prince Haelys, who stands before her with an expression of pure indifference. Catherine's eyes lock onto Haelys, the man who condemned her to a brutal public execution, and a storm of emotion swirls within her. As they face each other for the first time in this new life, she makes a silent, ironclad vow to bring down him and his entire kingdom. She will see her vengeance through, no matter what it takes. Hiding her true intentions behind a serene smile, she greets the Crown Prince, stating that it is a pleasure to finally meet him. Prince Haelys strides down the long hall, courtiers bowing as he approaches his waiting bride. He greets Catherine with a gentle smile, suggesting they dispense with formalities and asking her to simply call him Haelys. Returning the smile with practiced grace, she thanks him and agrees, requesting he in turn call her Catherine. Haelys observes her, noting with some surprise that she seems completely composed, showing no signs of distress despite being married into an enemy nation. He finds her both graceful and beautiful, but more than that, he senses a woman with a powerful inner strength. Acknowledging that he does not yet fully understand her, he gestures for her to accompany him. The scene shifts to the exterior of a grand, sunlit cathedral, its spires reaching toward the heavens. Inside, a priest stands before the royal couple at the altar, asking Crown Prince Halis if he vows before God and the people to protect the kingdom and bring it prosperity alongside his beloved bride. Halis affirms his vow to God and the kingdom, promising to protect the country and its people with Catherine and to strive for their prosperity. The priest then turns his attention to Catherine, asking if she too vows to pursue happiness and peace for the nation with her beloved crown prince. With a steady gaze, Catherine vows before God and the people to pursue peace with Halis and to do everything in her power for the kingdom's prosperity. The priest declares their vow to be an eternal bond that will shape the nation's future, praying that their love ensures the kingdom's glory will continue forever. As the ceremony concludes, the gathered crowd erupts in celebration, cheering for the long life of Prince Halis and Lady Catherine. Catherine's eyes narrow almost imperceptibly as she internally scoffs at the very mention of prosperity. A dark, determined smile touches her lips as she silently swears an oath to herself to destroy this country with her own 2 hands. Her gaze sweeps over the applauding crowd, landing on the king and queen of the Highland Kingdom. She knows their true purpose is to use her as a political tool, a pawn to facilitate their planned war against her homeland of Waltilla, all for the sake of their own power. It becomes clear to her that these two were the masterminds behind everything, and that even her brutal execution was part of their scheme from the very beginning. She then spots Halis' younger brother, Liam, standing beside his fiancée, Christina. She remembers how they feigned support while secretly burning with jealousy, viewing her as a rival in the line of succession and plotting her eventual downfall. Finally, her thoughts turn to the maid, Maria, who is far more than she appears. Though whose orders she followed remains a mystery, Catherine knows Maria led her to the execution platform under the guise of being a harmless servant. She resolves that this time will be different. No longer a nervous, naive girl, she will carefully observe all the enemies who orchestrated her demise, uncover their true intentions, and rewrite her fate. Later, at the wedding reception, the grand ballroom is filled with nobles dancing and celebrating the royal union. Guests murmur amongst themselves, commenting on how the new crown princess is even more beautiful than the rumors claimed, seeing her as a splendid omen for the nation's future. After some time, Halis slumps onto a nearby sofa, sighing that he seems to have had too much to drink. Across the room, Catherine calmly pours a cup of water from a pitcher. A maid rushes forward to take over the task, but Catherine waves her off, saying that it is fine. She brings the cup to Halis, offering him the water. He looks up at her, startled by the gesture. He utters her name in surprise, Catherine? She gently urges him to drink, advising him not to try and keep pace with every guest, as he will not last the night if he continues drinking so heavily. He takes the cup and thanks her, impressed by her composure, especially for someone 6 years younger than him. He reflects on the rumors he had heard, which painted her as nothing more than a sheltered and shy young woman. After he finishes, Catherine suggests they should go, taking his arm to guide him. They walk together through the hall as a couple, drawing the eyes of the other guests. Liam and Christina intercept them, with Liam eagerly offering his congratulations once more. He compliments Catherine's beautiful outfit but adds that he feels guilty praising her so in front of his own lovely fiancée, Christina. Christina playfully tells Catherine that Liam is always this flattering, while Liam adds that his brother is lucky to have such a beautiful bride. With a sweet smile, Christina asks if it is too soon to call Catherine sister-in-law, and requests that she be kind to them both. Catherine returns the smile warmly, telling her that of course she may. Internally, however, her thoughts are cold and calculating. She identifies these two as a pair she must be especially wary of. She considers their ambition and jealousy, wondering if she could manipulate those traits to turn them into allies for her own cause. On the surface, Halis simply thanks his brother and Christina for their heartfelt congratulations. Just then, a stern-faced man in a knight's uniform approaches them, asking for a moment of the crown prince's time. Halis turns to Catherine, explaining that the knight commander, George, is summoning him and that he will return shortly. Catherine watches the back of the knight commander as he and Halis walk away. Her mind flashes back to her previous life, remembering that George had sacrificed his very position in an attempt to save her. When she was imprisoned and alone, he was the only person who had quietly tried to support her. She recalls that he often acted as her bodyguard, but they rarely spoke, and she never understood why he would risk so much for her. The depth of her gratitude for his actions is immeasurable. His loyalty proved he was a man worthy of absolute trust. Her gaze drifts across the bustling ballroom, her mind hard at work. She knows that using the same half-hearted strategies as before will only lead her down the same path to ruin. To survive the treacherous political currents of the Highland royal court, she must devise a much more solid and cunning plan. A crucial part of that plan will be to secure trustworthy allies. She briefly wonders if she can rely on the noble knight commander George once again. She immediately rejects the idea, deciding that she cannot drag a good man into her dark quest for revenge and cause him more trouble. If at all possible, she wants to avoid involving him this time and find someone else to use. She scans the faces in the crowd, searching for another person, another piece she can move on her board. She needs a new ally, someone who will unknowingly support her intricate plans for destruction. Her eyes narrow as she considers who could become her loyal. Just then, Halys returns to her side, apologizing for the delay. The sight of him makes her startle, and an audacious idea suddenly sparks in her mind. Of course, it's Halys. The first and most important step is to make her own husband her unwitting ally. She remembers him as a man without strong opinions, easily influenced by others, but not inherently evil. In her past life, he had been kind to her at first, before the constant whispers of those around him brainwashed him into believing she was a wicked witch. With newfound clarity and chilling resolve, she sets her first mission. She will turn Prince Halys into her loyal servant. She looks at him, a soft expression on her face, and asks if something is wrong. He seems nervous, looking away as she watches him with feigned concern. He begins to speak about what is to happen next, and she calmly tells him that she is listening. She finishes his sentence for him, noting with a sly smile that the bedding ceremony is next. Halys turns away slightly, a faint blush coloring his cheeks. Night has fallen over the castle, a full moon shining brightly above the highest tower. Having completed their public duties, Catherine and Halys were now about to spend their wedding night together. The spires of the Highland castle are silhouetted against a starry sky and a sliver of moon. Inside a grand bedchamber, maids attend to Catherine, preparing her for the wedding night. Maria kneels at Catherine's feet, a sly smile on her face as she asks the new crown princess if she is feeling nervous. Catherine looks down at her coldly, questioning Maria's disrespectful tone. The startled maid immediately apologizes for her forwardness. Another maid quickly interjects, praising Catherine's admirable and unshakable heart in any situation. Maria recovers, informing Catherine that the royal first night is somewhat unusual and asking if she is aware of its nature. Catherine affirms that she is, though she thinks to herself that 3 years ago, she had known absolutely nothing. She recalls her past life, where Maria, as head maid, had the duty to explain the ceremony but instead taught her nothing, seemingly enjoying the sight of her trembling in fear. Her preparations now complete, the maids step back and announce that she looks absolutely beautiful. One of the other maids adds that Maria is cheering for her success. Catherine's eye twitches at the blatant hypocrisy. With chilling calm, she tells Maria that before offering cheers, she should have fulfilled her duty of properly instructing her on the first night, warning the maid to be prepared as she will be raising this neglect of duty as a formal issue. Now ready, Catherine is escorted by 2 maids down a long, ornate hallway toward the royal bedchamber. She enters the room to find Halys sitting on the edge of a large bed, surrounded by an assembly of the royal court's most powerful figures. Among them is Chancellor Sebastian Waverley, who watches with a smug and knowing grin. She recognizes the others, the Minister of Finance, Martin Holloway, the Minister of Justice, Felicia Dorr, and the head nanny, Juliet Alden. Also in attendance are Priest Cole Montford and Court Secretary Edward Brighton, a true gathering of the kingdom's elite, all present to witness the consummation. Catherine walks calmly across the room, approaching Halys, who keeps his head bowed in apparent misery. He looks up briefly, his face a mask of sweat and anxiety under the scrutinizing gaze of the court. She stands beside him at the foot of the bed while the priest moves to begin the ritual. The nature of the bedding ceremony is explained as a Highland tradition meant to ensure the continuation of the royal line, a ritual that causes immense mental suffering for those involved. Exposed to the eyes of numerous nobles, the royal couple is forced to perform the act publicly, all under the heavy burden of guaranteeing the family's prosperity. Behind the inherited glory of the royal line, the act becomes nothing more than a duty for the sake of national interest, forcing the couple to serve as mere symbols. Chancellor Waverley steps forward and addresses the prince, asking Lord Halys if he is ready to proceed. Halys flinches, visibly distressed, as a maid helps Catherine remove her outer robe, leaving her in a simple nightgown. The priest performs a blessing for their first night, sprinkling holy water over them from a small brush. The onlookers' faces are cast in shadow, their eyes fixed on the couple as the priest urges Crown Prince Halis to begin. Halis' eyes are wide with terror, the pressure of the moment overwhelming him. Catherine remembers this exact scene from her first life, 3 years ago. The memory floods back, the nobles of the past mocking Halis' hesitation, urging him on while feigning concern for the bride. She recalls her past self, sitting on the bed, terrified by the crowd of people and praying desperately for someone to save her. In the flashback, a lecherous noble had reached for her, asking if they should lend their support. Halis' hand had shot out, slapping the man's hand away from her. The prince had glared at the noble, his face a mixture of anger and humiliation. He then roughly pushed her down onto the mattress as the noble cheered that he was doing great. The memory shows both of their faces, etched with misery and shame. She had cried out that it hurts. The Chancellor's past self had commented that Lord Halis seemed unused to handling women, a fact that didn't bode well for the future. The head nanny had chided the Chancellor for his disrespectful tone toward the prince. The traumatic memory continues, her past self screaming in pain and fear. She had cried out again that it hurt. Halis had looked pained and miserable, forced to perform under duress. The head nanny had callously instructed Catherine to spread her legs more. Another noble had laughed, remarking on the difficulty of handling a virgin. The Chancellor had added with a smirk that Lord Halis didn't seem to be doing well either. The humiliating ordeal had continued under the watchful eyes of the court. By the end, both she and Halis were left looking exhausted and traumatized. The nobles had remained, observing them in the aftermath. They had criticized her performance, telling her to be more proactive and complaining that ensuring an heir would be a rough road ahead. Back in the present, Halis sits frozen, paralyzed by the same pressure. The court of nobles stands silently, their collective gaze fixed upon the royal bed. Chancellor Waverley once again prods the prince, telling him with a laugh not to keep the bride waiting. Catherine's expression hardens with resolve. She understands that she must act now. She reaches out and gently takes Halis' trembling hand in her own. Looking at him with a calm and reassuring smile, she tells him that it's okay and to leave everything to her. As Catherine holds Halis' hand, her calm resolve contrasts sharply with his visible distress under the watchful eyes of the court. She rises and faces the assembly, her voice steady as she requests they allow her and the prince a moment to speak alone. The nobles and maids stare back, a wave of shock and confusion rippling through the room at her unprecedented demand. Chancellor Sebastian is the first to find his voice, angrily accusing her of attempting to flee from their kingdom's sacred and traditional ceremony. Other nobles quickly join the chorus of disapproval, declaring that such a request is unheard of and that the important bedding ceremony must not be taken so lightly. Catherine cuts through their protests with a sharp command for them to be quiet. Her expression softens, tears welling in her eyes as she explains that this is a very special night for them, pleading earnestly for their understanding. She continues, admitting that while she herself is incredibly anxious, the person feeling the most pressure and anxiety in the room is Halis. She declares that her only wish is to ease the heart of her beloved husband, even if just for a moment. Halis looks up at her, his expression filled with surprise and gratitude. With a final, heartfelt plea, she asks if they would please allow the couple a little time to themselves. Empowered by her support, Halis stands beside her, his voice now firm as he seconds her request, asking the court to leave them alone together. Catherine turns to him with a bright, genuine smile, and he looks back at her, a hint of a blush on his cheeks. The heavy doors of the bedchamber swing shut, finally granting them privacy as Halis sinks to his knees before her. He takes her hands in his, looking up at her with profound gratitude and thanking her for her intervention. He confesses that had they been forced to go through with the public ritual, it would have become a painful memory, turning every moment of intimacy into an act of suffering for her. Catherine silently reflects on her past life, knowing he speaks the truth. The trauma of that first night had destroyed their intimacy and caused their marriage to grow cold. As he kneels before her, she gently tells Halis that he needs to have more confidence in himself. She reminds him that he is the future king, the only one with the power to change the country's strange traditions, urging him to forge his own path instead of following outdated customs. Halis gazes at her, clearly moved and emboldened by her unwavering faith in him. He rises, leans in, and they share their first gentle, private kiss. He pulls her into a warm embrace, whispering that he is truly glad she became his wife and swearing to love her for the rest of his life. Catherine rests her head on his shoulder, accepting the embrace. As she holds him, her eyes open, a cold and calculating glint within them as she thinks, "Thank you, her first mission now a success." A sharp knock at the door shatters the moment. The Chancellor's voice booms from outside, asking if their talk is finished so the ceremony can begin, prompting Halys to tell them to enter. As the door opens, Halys stands protectively before Catherine, his demeanor transformed as he commands the nobles not to step any further into the sacred space. The courtiers halt in their tracks, stunned into silence by the prince's newfound and unexpected authority. Halys declares that he will use his own authority to personally select the witnesses. He commands the head nanny, Juliet, to remain and orders everyone else to leave. The Chancellor sputters in disbelief, demanding to know what Halys just said. He angrily challenges the prince, asking what he thinks he's doing by defying the palace's traditions and calling his decision foolish. Halys coolly retorts, questioning whether this so-called tradition is anything more than a twisted form of entertainment born from their own boredom. He looks directly at the Chancellor and reminds him with quiet authority that he is the next king. He warns Lord Sebastian to think far more carefully about the words he directs at the crown from now on. The Chancellor glares, clenching his teeth in silent, impotent fury. The head nanny and the few other chosen witnesses bow their heads, humbly accepting their duty with respect. The grand bedchamber is now quiet, with only Juliet standing as a silent, distant observer. Outside in the hall, the dismissed nobles gather in a furious clump, barred from their spectacle by the closed door. Chancellor Sebastian angrily summons the others to gather around him. Prince Liam arrives, smiling as he asks if the ceremony has already concluded, only for the Chancellor to roar that everything has been ruined. The enraged Chancellor rants that he has no idea what Halys or Catherine are thinking, complaining that the public ritual was the only thing he was looking forward to. Another noble tries to shush him, reminding him to mind his words in front of the second prince, but Liam simply watches the scene with a cold, calculating gaze. Liam's eyes narrow as he silently wonders what in the world could have happened to cause such an upset. Inside the peaceful room, Catherine and Halys sit on the bed, sharing a look of quiet understanding. He gently lifts her into his arms, carrying her onto the bed. Finally and truly alone, she turns to him with a soft, genuine smile. With the court dismissed, Halys removes his shirt as Catherine waits for him on the bed, the atmosphere in the room now quiet and private. He leans down and they share a slow, tender kiss, a stark contrast to the ceremony that almost was. They fall into a gentle embrace, holding each other with a newfound intimacy. The two lie together in the bed, wrapped in each other's arms as husband and wife. Outside the castle walls, the moon and stars shine down on the silent kingdom. The next morning, sunlight streams into the royal bedchamber, illuminating the couple sleeping soundly in an embrace. Halys awakens first and gazes at Catherine sleeping beside him, a soft, contented smile on his face as he thinks himself a truly lucky man. He gently pulls her closer, and she nestles against his chest as they continue to rest. A moment later, Catherine's eyes flutter open as she awakens in his arms. She looks up at him and, with a quiet sincerity, tells him that she feels the same way. Halys beams, closing his eyes in simple, happy contentment. But as he rests, Catherine's expression becomes serious, her mind already at work. She notes how completely different Halys is now, realizing the first night's ritual must have been a deep, lingering trauma for him in their previous life. The head nanny, Juliet, having fulfilled her duty as the sole witness, quietly closes the chamber door and departs. Catherine lies in the quiet room, a sense of victory settling over her as she recognizes that through her calculated actions, the future is already beginning to change. In a separate parlor, the dismissed nobles and maids wait, their moods ranging from impatient to furious. Chancellor Sebastian immediately confronts Lady Juliet as she enters the room after leaving the couple's chambers. Prince Liam is the first to question her, asking what happened inside. Juliet simply smiles and reports that the royal couple were deeply in love, so she excused herself. The nobles react with stunned disbelief, one stammering that it is to be expected of the future king, while Liam looks genuinely surprised by the report. The Chancellor lets out a hearty laugh, admitting he was worried since Catherine looked so terrified, but that it seems he had nothing to fear after all. Another noble remarks that it will only be a matter of time before an heir is born, but Maria stands stiffly in the background, her face a mask of cold fury. Her eyes narrow and she clenches her teeth, thinking to herself that she must do something about that woman, Catherine. Later in the day, maids attend to Catherine in her personal chambers, one complimenting her on how especially beautiful she looks. A maid asks if her plan is to spend a quiet day at the estate, and Catherine confirms that it is. She sits patiently, her expression thoughtful as the maids finish their work. A sudden knock at the door makes them all turn. Maria, standing nearby, looks particularly suspicious. One of the maids calls out, asking who is there, and a hesitant voice from the other side identifies himself as Halys, asking for Catherine. Catherine looks toward the door, her expression one of pure surprise. She wonders what he could want, as they were together only a short while ago, reflecting that in her past life he had visited her chambers only a handful of times. She opens the door to find him standing there in his formal military attire and asks what brings him here so early in the day. He nervously brushes an invisible speck of dust from his epaulette. Without a word, he suddenly steps forward and pulls her into a fierce, unexpected hug, whispering her name and telling her he wanted to see her. Catherine is completely taken aback, her eyes wide with shock at this spontaneous display of affection. He pulls back, apologizing and admitting it sounds strange since they were just together, but he simply had to see her again. With a slight blush, he asks if she would like to join him for brunch in the courtyard, provided she is feeling well. A flustered Catherine quickly agrees. She smiles brightly and tells him that she would love that. The two are later seen enjoying their meal together in a beautiful gazebo, surrounded by the lush palace gardens. The table between them is laden with an assortment of fine pastries, cakes, and other delicacies. Halys eagerly offers her a plate with a specialty dessert from his country, hoping that it will be to her taste. Catherine graciously accepts, remarking on how kind and wonderful he is, which prompts him to declare that he truly wants to do anything he can for her. She takes a sip from her teacup, a serene and happy smile on her face. The moment she takes a bite of the pastry, however, her smile vanishes, replaced by a cold, analytical look as she thinks to herself how simple a man Halys truly is. A memory of his cruel words from her past life flashes in her mind. Being with you makes me feel depressed, and she wishes she could have warned her former self. She sets her teacup down with a quiet click and looks at him with a newfound seriousness. Getting his attention, she tells him that there is something she needs him to look into for her. In the sunlit gazebo, Catherine and Halys continue their brunch, a quiet moment between them. Her expression turns serious as she tells him there is something she needs him to look into. Halys immediately leans forward, his expression earnest as he insists she just say the word if there is anything he can do to help. Catherine thanks him with a gentle smile before steeling herself to begin her careful manipulation. With a troubled look, she explains that her request concerns her personal maid, Maria. Halys looks back at her, confused, repeating the maid's name as a question. He immediately jumps to a conclusion, asking with alarm if Maria has treated her disrespectfully. Catherine feigns reluctance, putting a hand to her cheek and saying she hates to sound like a tattletale. She recounts how Maria was supposed to provide a proper explanation of the bedding ceremony but failed to do so, leaving her confused and anxious from the start. Halys is horrified. He leaps to his feet in a fury, declaring Maria's actions an unforgivable dereliction of duty and vowing to have her immediately removed from Catherine's side and severely punished. Catherine quickly stands to stop him, her expression one of gentle forgiveness as she insists she doesn't resent the maid. She artfully reframes the situation, suggesting that perhaps because Maria told her nothing, she felt brave enough to make the outrageous suggestion for them to be alone, for which she is now grateful. Halys stares at her, his anger subsiding into confusion at her benevolent perspective. He asks then what it is she truly wants him to investigate. She tells him she wants to know who gave the order for Maria to be assigned to her. Her internal thoughts betray her true intention. If she can discover who is pulling Maria's strings, she will know her enemy. Once the true foe is clearly identified, she thinks with cold determination, the real battle will finally begin. She is about to tell him she already suspects who is behind it, making an investigation unnecessary. Before she can speak, Halys looks at her with wide, curious eyes and asks who she thinks it is. He pauses, his own expression becoming troubled as he looks down at his hands. In a quiet, hesitant voice, he confesses that the one who assigned Maria was him. Catherine's mind goes blank, her eyes widening in absolute shock at the one answer she never expected. She stammers his name, asking if he truly assigned Maria, and he confirms that he did. Her thoughts race in turmoil, questioning if Halys was the mastermind all along or if Maria had manipulated him, struggling to reconcile this with the naive prince she thought she knew. Halys looks up at her, his face a mask of regret, and apologizes profusely, admitting that in truth he didn't know much about Maria at all. Catherine can only stare, her carefully constructed plans crumbling in the face of this new information. He goes on to explain that he had received several recommendations for a personal maid from Lady Christina, his brother Liam's fiancée. He chose Maria from among them, but now bitterly regrets not thinking more carefully about the person who would be caring for someone as important as Catherine. With sincere remorse, he bows his head and asks if she can forgive him for his carelessness. Snapping back to the present, Catherine forces a bright smile, reassuring him that she isn't angry at all and that simply knowing the truth is enough, causing him to look up with visible relief. A moment of silence passes between them, the dynamic of their young relationship having shifted once again. Later, Catherine sits alone in her drawing room, contemplating the new revelation. It is now almost certain, she concludes, that second Prince Liam and his fiancée Christina were the ones who orchestrated Maria's actions from the beginning. Given their fierce competition with Halys over the succession rights, their treachery is not surprising. Her mind then drifts to Maria's other tactics from her past life. She recalls Maria tricking her into drinking a medicine meant to help with fertility, realizing now with a cold dread that it was likely a poison. Her goal now is to destroy the kingdom, but the memory of that betrayal is perhaps the worst of all. She considers that having Halys' child would run counter to her plans for revenge, and with how easily he is handled, he is a useful tool. But his tendency to be swayed by emotion makes him unreliable in the long term. She remembers his past cruelty and knows he could be turned against her again. She worries about what might be in any medicine Maria offers her now and what damage it could do, resolving that she cannot simply drink it blindly this time. Her thoughts are interrupted by a sharp knock at the door, startling her. She wonders who it could be, as she had specifically requested privacy, claiming she wasn't feeling well. Her first thought is that it might be Halys returning once again. Her maid opens the door, revealing a man in the uniform of the Royal Knights. Catherine looks up in surprise to see the visitor is the captain of the Knights, George. George, the captain of the Knights, stands at Catherine's door, apologizing for his sudden visit and explaining that Prince Halys had told him she was unwell. He asks how she is feeling, clarifying that while Halys wanted to bring her a gift himself, he thought it prudent to avoid contact until her condition was confirmed. Catherine quietly acknowledges him, her mind recalling that the last time they had a real conversation was during her formal introduction to the court. She assures him that she is fine now, having recovered completely after a brief rest. George suggests the gift is therefore not needed and prepares to take his leave, but Catherine quickly says she will gladly accept his kind gesture. As he turns to depart, Catherine impulsively calls out for him to wait. George stops and looks back at her, his expression questioning. He waits silently for her to speak. Catherine panics internally, realizing she stopped him without a reason and now must invent one. George asks if something is wrong. Thinking fast, she puts on a smile and says that since he went through the trouble of bringing the gift, she has decided to accept it after all. She explains that it would be rude to return a gift that Halys was so thoughtful to send, and asks if George would mind carrying it to her room. As he follows her inside, she internally scolds herself for acting so pointlessly just to buy a brief moment of time with him. Once they are in her private parlor, George asks if she has grown accustomed to living in the palace. She replies that she is still getting used to it little by little, while thinking to herself that after 3 years in her previous life, she should be more than familiar with it by now. She knows, however, that she could never actually say such a thing out loud. She simply offers a slight, polite bow of her head. George watches her, a faint, gentle smile on his lips. Catherine feels an uncharacteristic blush rise to her cheeks, realizing with a jolt that she lets her guard down around George and must be more careful. She turns away abruptly, stating that this is enough for now. George softly speaks her name, getting her attention once more. He tells her with utmost sincerity that if she ever needs help, she must not hesitate to rely on him. Catherine stares at him, her eyes wide and shimmering with unshed tears. He kneels before her, vowing that no matter what happens, he will always be on her side. Moved beyond words, she can only whisper a thank you. With his promise made, he rises and departs, leaving Catherine standing alone by the window. She watches him go, her mind reeling as she wonders why he would say that to her. It felt, she thinks, as if he knew exactly what she needed to hear, and a fleeting thought crosses her mind. If she had married a kind man like him, perhaps her life would have been different. A new, dangerous idea suddenly takes root in her mind. What if she could carry the child of a man who was not Halys? Her heart thuds in her chest at the sheer audacity of such a treasonous thought. If she could ensure she did not get pregnant during her nights with the prince, She muses, it might be possible to choose the father of her own child. An image of George's kind face flashes in her mind. She immediately shakes her head, dismissing the notion. She reminds herself that even if George is on her side, he is still the loyal knight commander who serves this country. There is no way, she concludes, that he would ever agree to help her commit treason against the crown prince. She sighs in frustration. The idea is a good one, but ultimately impractical. As she sits alone in her lavish room, she comes to the grim realization that her path to revenge is not going to be easy. Unbeknownst to her, George has not left, but is standing just outside her door in the hallway. He lingers for a moment, his expression unreadable, before turning to walk away. Catherine watches from her room as George stands for a moment in the doorway. He glances back with a somber, unreadable expression on his face. After a brief pause, he turns and walks away down the long, empty hall. A fire of determination burns in Catherine's eyes as she watches him leave. Elsewhere in the palace, the maid Maria walks purposefully down a corridor. She arrives at a pair of ornate double doors, knocks, and announces her presence. A voice from within grants her entry, and she opens the door to a private parlor. Inside, Prince Liam and his fiancée, Christina, sit leisurely, sipping from wine glasses. Maria stands before them and begins to report on the current situation. She starts by mentioning that Catherine is feeling unwell, but Liam strikes her across the face, shouting for her silence. He furiously demands an explanation for her failure, reminding her that her specific job was to drive a wedge between his brother and the new princess. Liam fumes that despite her efforts, Halys has become completely enamored with Catherine ever since the disastrous bedding ceremony. A tearful Maria, cradling her bruised cheek, sincerely apologizes, explaining that she had been told Catherine was a naive and sheltered girl. She confesses her failed plan. She assumed that withholding information about the ceremony would cause Catherine to panic and make a fool of herself, but she admits that she underestimated her target. Christina looks down at the deeply bowing maid, who offers another profuse apology. Without warning, Christina rises and delivers a vicious slap to Maria's other cheek. The force of the blow sends the maid sprawling to the floor. Christina then crouches down, a deceptively sweet smile on her face as she asks Maria if she'll do better next time. Her eyes turn cold and menacing as she reminds the maid not to forget that they took her in when she was lost and starving, and that her debt has yet to be repaid. A terrified Maria scrambles back up, promising that she will absolutely succeed with her next attempt. Liam informs her that a delegation from their allied nation of Beluria is arriving next week, and that the crown prince will be at the welcoming ceremony. He explains that Beluria's crown prince is an old acquaintance of Halys, and if Catherine embarrasses herself in front of him, his brother's newfound affection will surely sour. Liam's eyes narrow as he lays out the rest of the plan. He concludes that if Catherine causes a diplomatic incident with their crucial ally, even his father, the king, will turn his wrath upon her. Liam and Christina share a dark, conspiratorial smile, confident in their new scheme. The scene shifts back to the palace gardens, where Catherine's peaceful brunch with Halys is concluding. Halys returns to the gazebo, cheerfully asking Catherine if she found the pastries delicious. She smiles warmly and replies that they were wonderful. As she looks out at the garden, however, her smile fades, her mind already focused on the upcoming visit from the Belurian delegation. She recalls from her past life that the main objective of this visit, disguised as a simple cultural exchange, was, in fact, critical trade negotiations. An infographic in her memory explains that Beluria is a nation rich in mineral resources, which the Highland Kingdom was desperate to import to bolster its military power. This alliance was therefore a lifeline to the pro-war faction within the royal court, which was eager to push forward with preparations for conquest. She remembers that King Henry himself was a key member of this pro-war faction. Beluria, on the other hand, was less developed and desperately needed to import food, ceramics, and pharmaceuticals from Highland. Beneath the veneer of pleasant diplomacy, each side had its own hidden and self-serving agenda. Catherine recalls with bitterness how, as a naive new bride, she had failed to understand any of these schemes and had walked right into a trap, committing a major blunder that damaged her reputation. Catherine sits in the garden, attended by her maids, her mind far away. Her expression is grim as she remembers the great disgrace that sealed her fate in her previous life. She recalls the anxiety she felt over her strained relationship with Halys following their traumatic wedding night. Desperate to win his affection, she had consulted with Maria, the one person in the palace she naively believed she could rely on. Together, They had devised a plan for her to restore her honor during the visit from the Bellurian delegation. Her past self had been so hopeful, so unaware of the trap being laid. At the time, she could think of no better way to improve her standing than to present a personal gift to Crown Prince Stefan of Belluria. She had chosen a piece of fine Highland pottery, a vase decorated with a striking black butterfly motif. The choice was deeply symbolic for her, as black butterflies are considered messengers of the gods and a sign of prosperity in her homeland. She remembers presenting the gift to Prince Stefan, who had accepted it with a polite, unreadable smile, giving no hint that in the kingdom of Belluria, black butterflies are a terrible omen. The other Bellurian nobles had looked on, their faces twisting in horror. For in their country, the black butterfly was nothing less than a symbol of death, a fact Maria knew all too well. In the aftermath, Catherine was harshly condemned by the entire royal family for the grave insult. Maria had put on a convincing performance, crying and apologizing for her ignorance. Looking back with the clarity of her new life, Catherine now realizes that the entire incident was deliberately manipulated. The scene returns to the present day, with Halys rejoining Catherine in the garden gazebo. He asks if she enjoyed her quiet time, and she thanks him, saying that she did. He brings up the upcoming horseback riding contest with Stefan, then asks if Catherine is on friendly terms with the visiting prince. Halys admits with a sigh that he has always admired Stefan, looking up to him like an older brother. He confesses his own deep-seated doubts about his fitness to rule, a fate he was born into but for which he feels unsuited. Unlike himself, he says, Stefan possesses the qualities of a true king, an ideal he has been chasing his entire life. Catherine remarks that Stefan sounds like a wonderful person and says she must prepare herself so as not to show him any disrespect. Halys quickly insists she needs no preparation, telling her she is already wonderful. Catherine, however, thinks to herself that since Stefan is so important to Halys, she cannot afford to mess this up. Her eyes gleam with resolve as she feels the future beginning to change. With her new knowledge and confidence, she is sure that this time, she will be okay. Sometime later, Catherine is seen walking through a town square. Disguised in simple cloaks, she, Halys, and George browse the local shops, with Catherine pointing out one she'd like to visit. The shop is filled with shelves of exquisite pottery, vases, and plates. Catherine comments on how lovely all the items are. Her gaze suddenly freezes as she spots it, the very same black butterfly vase from her past. A painful memory surfaces as she recalls choosing this exact item, an act that led to her downfall. Just as she stares at it, George steps forward, advising her that he does not recommend that particular item. He explains that while the black butterfly is a lucky motif in her homeland, it is considered an ominous symbol in Belluria. Catherine is struck by a sudden, regretful thought. Why didn't she bring George with her back then? If she had, she realizes with a pang, she might have avoided that catastrophic failure entirely. She thanks George for his crucial advice and agrees to look for something else, just as Halys presents another vase for her consideration. Her eyes land on a different piece, this one decorated with a magnificent phoenix. George immediately praises it as a very good choice, as the phoenix is an auspicious symbol in Belluria. Halys' face lights up, adding that Stefan once told him he wished to be strong like a phoenix, so he is sure to love it. Catherine gazes at the beautiful vase, a warm blush on her cheeks. She turns to her companions and thanks both of them for their help. Later, as they ride back to the palace, Catherine feels a sense of hope. She reflects that Halys has changed so much for the better, and that George, as always, is on her side. If she can continue to live like this, she feels, everything will go well. The day of the Bellurian delegation's visit finally arrives. The Highland court is assembled in the Grand Hall, awaiting their guests. The doors open, and Crown Prince Stefan of Belluria makes his entrance. Halys greets his old friend warmly, and Stefan congratulates him on his recent marriage. Halys proudly introduces his wife, and Catherine greets Stefan with a polite smile, saying she has looked forward to meeting him. Stefan takes her hand, remarking to Halys how happy he must be with such a beautiful wife, and Halys agrees that he is incredibly proud of her. The two princes share a laugh, the atmosphere warm and friendly. Watching from the sidelines, Maria seethes with rage, furious that Catherine's caution in keeping the gift locked in a safe prevented her from swapping it out. The maid slips away unnoticed and heads toward a heavily secured storage area. She produces a key, thinking that thanks to Lord Liam's arrangements, she was finally able to acquire it the night before. With a sinister grin, she inserts the key into a heavy padlock. She opens the ornate chest where the real gift is stored. Back in the reception hall, The diplomatic pleasantries continue. Halys proudly announces that Catherine has prepared a gift for their esteemed guest. Catherine presents the ornate box to Stefan, who correctly guesses from its size and weight that it might be Highland's famous pottery. Both Halys and Catherine eagerly tell him that they chose it with all their hearts and encourage him to open it. Prince Stefan lifts the lid of the box to reveal the gift inside. Resting on the silk lining is the black butterfly vase. Both Halys and Stefan stare at it, their faces frozen in identical masks of horror. A wave of shock and disgust ripples through the Balurian delegation. From the edge of the room, Maria watches her plan unfold, a triumphant, wicked smirk on her face. In another part of the hall, Liam and Christina share a subtle, smug smile. Catherine can only stare at the box, the world falling silent around her as her carefully laid plans once again turn to ash. A tense silence falls over the reception hall as the nobles murmur amongst themselves, confused and offended by the shocking gift. Catherine stands firm amidst the chaos, her expression cold and unyielding. In the crowd, Christina, Liam, and Maria can barely contain their wicked, triumphant smiles. Prince Stefan forces a strained smile, stammering that he will gladly accept the gift and asking if they chose it together. Halys, utterly mortified, turns to Catherine and quietly asks why this vase was the one in the box. As Stefan awkwardly holds the symbol of death, Halys has an epiphany. While all eyes are on the disastrous gift exchange, Maria tries to slip away from the hall unnoticed. But Catherine's sharp gaze finds her, and their eyes lock for a brief, tense moment. In a sudden, decisive movement, Catherine reaches out and snatches the cursed vase from Prince Stefan's hands. She then smashes it to pieces on the marble floor, the sound echoing through the stunned hall as Liam, Christina, and Maria look on in horror. With a radiant and triumphant smile, Catherine spreads her arms and declares that with her act, the nation of Baluria has been freed from the symbol of death. She then calls for George, the captain of the knights, to step forward. George appears from a side room, carrying the real gift, the phoenix vase. A bewildered Halys turns to Catherine, asking her what is going on. She calmly takes the new vase and presents it to the still-stunned Prince Stefan. She explains that what they just witnessed was merely a small performance, a bit of fun, and that this phoenix vase is her true gift. Stefan stares at her, his expression a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. She continues, noting that unlike the black butterfly, she has heard the phoenix is a symbol of extreme luck in Baluria. As a symbol of eternity, she wishes that the bond between their two nations will flourish forever like the beautiful bird. With tears of sincerity shining in her eyes, she tells him that she wishes for this from the bottom of her heart. Prince Stefan is visibly moved by her powerful and diplomatic words. He thanks her for such a wonderful gift and tells Halys that he has a truly lovely princess whom he must take good care of. Halys beams with pride, his face alight with joy as he enthusiastically promises that he will. From the sidelines, Maria seethes in silent fury as her plan crumbles, attempting once more to sneak away. A strong arm suddenly shoots out, and George grabs her by the neck, stopping her in her tracks. He holds her fast, his voice ice-cold as he asks where she thinks she is going. He reveals to the terrified maid that he saw everything, from the moment she used a spare key to open the vault and swap the porcelain gifts. Catherine watches with satisfaction, thinking to herself that with Maria now crushed, all that remains is to see how Liam and the others will react. The scene shifts to the throne room, where a captured Maria is forced to kneel before King Henry and the Queen. The king asks for clarification, wanting to know if the entire commotion was planned by this single maid. Halys steps forward to explain that just before the presentation, multiple knights witnessed Maria swapping the gifts. Catherine adds that, aware of the visit's importance, they had stored the gift in a secure vault under George's protection to prevent any mishaps. She feigns disappointment, sighing that she had hoped nothing would go wrong, as Liam and Christina watch with growing nervousness. Halys reminds his father that this same maid also failed in her duties during the bedding ceremony, an offense Catherine had kindly overlooked, but one they can no longer ignore. Prince Stefan adds that if Catherine hadn't acted so quickly, the incident could have easily escalated into a problem affecting trade relations between their nations. Catherine lowers her head in a display of perfect humility. Maria trembles on the floor, desperately clinging to the hope that Liam and Christina will smooth things over for her as they promised. Liam looks down at her with a cold, menacing glare and asks the king what should be done with her, casually suggesting execution. Maria's eyes widen in terror. He then declares that since Christina recommended the maid, the fault is his as well, and asks to take full responsibility and custody of Maria, a request the king grants. Christina turns to Catherine and offers a saccharine apology for the trouble, leaving Maria utterly bewildered by their betrayal. The terrified maid looks between her former patrons, praying this is all just a joke. She clings to the desperate thought that they will surely let her go later. But the cold, impassive looks on their faces confirm her doom. She begins to cry out to Liam, but he cuts her off with a furious shout of silence. He shoves her face to the floor, calling her a low-born wretch and ordering a guard to bring a sword immediately. As she is gagged and dragged away by the guards, Maria's muffled screams for Lord Liam and Lady Christina go ignored. Liam and Christina watch without a flicker of emotion as their pawn is removed from the board. Catherine observes the scene with a small, cold smile, thinking that just as she predicted, they planned to abandon Maria to save themselves, but she will not let them escape so easily. Maria struggles against her bonds, gagged and held down by guards as Liam and Christina look on with cold indifference. Her eyes are wide with terror and disbelief as she internally screams, questioning why her supposed allies are doing this to her. A guard approaches Liam, presenting him with a bared sword. Liam takes the blade, his expression grim as he walks toward the helpless maid. The horrifying realization dawns on Maria. They are truly going to kill her just to ensure her silence. She feels a surge of rage, thinking it unforgivable that they would betray her after she risked her own life to serve them. Liam raises the sword high, sneering at how pathetic she is for clinging to life. Christina watches the scene unfold, a cruel, satisfied smile playing on her lips. Nearby, Halys and King Henry observe the grim proceedings with stern expressions. Liam grins down at Maria, telling her she should be grateful to die by his hand. Maria is paralyzed by fear, held firmly in place by the guards. In her final moments, she is crushed by the despairing realization that she chose the wrong people to serve. Her entire life, she thinks, has been nothing but a series of mistakes. The sword begins its swift descent. A sharp voice suddenly cuts through the tension, pleading for them to wait. The king, Halys, and a startled Christina turn toward the sound of the interruption. A tearful Maria looks up, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Catherine stands before them, acknowledging their anger on her behalf but stating that Maria's actions were clearly an attempt to disgrace her personally. She claims that seeing Maria sentenced to death would deeply pain her own heart. With a look of earnest compassion, she begs them to let her take the disgraced maid under her care once more. Liam protests in disbelief, utterly shocked by Catherine's request. He argues furiously that Maria's crime is an attack on royal authority, the highest form of treason, which demands the most extreme punishment. Catherine recognizes his words with a chill. They are the very same ones used to condemn her to death in her previous life. She turns her tear-filled eyes to Halys, begging him to intervene. Her performance of sorrow continues as she laments the thought of Maria being put to death. Halys, moved by her display of compassion, looks conflicted and sympathetic. Liam realizes with a jolt of panic that the situation is turning against him. He cannot allow Maria to live. He tries to regain control, telling Catherine that while he understands her feelings, the matter now concerns the authority of the entire royal family. But Halys steps forward, addressing his father, the king, and defending Catherine's plea as the wish of a kind-hearted woman who would feel responsible if Maria were killed. He passionately declares that he is worried about Catherine's well-being and begs the king on her behalf. Liam seethes with internal rage, cursing Halys for being so easily manipulated and for speaking out of turn. The king considers their words and then makes his decision, stating that if they feel so strongly, he will leave the matter in their hands. He looks sternly at his younger son and asks Liam if he understands the ruling. Defeated, Liam and Christina bow their heads and sullenly agree. They exchange a look of pure horror, realizing that letting Maria live is as good as putting their own lives in danger. Catherine approaches the still-bound Maria and gently tells her that everything is all right now. Maria stares in disbelief, saved by the very woman she tried to destroy. Catherine promises to put the past behind them, assuring Maria that she will not be interrogated or questioned. Liam and Christina watch the scene, their faces masks of barely concealed fury. Catherine offers Maria a deal. If she swears to serve her with all her heart, Catherine will protect her for the rest of her life, and a weeping Maria pledges her absolute loyalty. Through her tears, Maria declares that her life now belongs to Lady Catherine. Catherine helps the grateful maid to her feet in a public display of mercy. Liam and Christina are forced to play along, praising Catherine's splendid mercy and vast heart. They bow to the king and announce that they will take their leave. As they walk from the throne room, their facade of admiration crumbles away. Once alone, they erupt in panic, with Liam demanding to know what they are going to do, crying that they are finished if their plot is exposed. He dismisses Catherine's promise not to question Maria, worrying that the maid will ruin everything if she talks. He concludes with grim certainty that they must kill Maria as soon as possible. Later, Catherine sits in her parlor with Halys and a quiet, subdued Maria. She thanks Halys for his help and then asks him to step out for a moment so she can speak with the maid alone. Halys agrees but tells her to be careful before he exits the room, leaving the two women by themselves. A tense silence fills the parlor as Catherine and Maria sit opposite one another. Catherine breaks the silence by speaking Maria's name. She tells the maid with chilling certainty that if things continue as they are, she will be killed tonight. With cold eyes, Catherine delivers her true verdict. She is going to have Maria die right here, right now.